Imagine you're a lighthouse in a sea of job seekers. So imagine that everybody else is rowing their boats as fast as they can, and you're just standing there strong as a lighthouse, and things are coming to you. And I'm going to teach you in this video how to make that happen. So stay tuned. All right. So why this matters? Why? And it's even possible for you to believe this, right? People don't believe this at first, but I'm going to share an example of how this worked for me and how it can be easier for you to actually attract versus frantically chase and go after, and how that frantic chasing and following up relentlessly and that being attached to opportunities actually repels things energetically from you, where you can be a strong, powerful lighthouse that stands tall and bright and actually calls things in. So what happens when you master this is you get to gain freedom from your constant job searching, because you don't have to be constantly putting in so much effort to be chasing opportunities. Your professional reputation just becomes more magnetic. The conversations you have become more empowered, more confident, more meaningful, and more impactful, so you can have less of them. And your career advances with significantly less effort. Here's how it works. One is you need to position yourself as a value creator, whereas the mistake most people make is they will position themselves as just another candidate who tries to get the questions right, tries to impress, tries to start convincing them, the hiring managers, that they are the right person, instead of positioning themselves as someone who creates value and solves real problems and makes a real impact and gets real results. So when you position yourself like this, you attract, you have people coming to you. You become somebody who is a resource, somebody who people want to go after, instead of you needing to be the pushy one who's trying to convince, trying to over-explain, trying to justify gaps on your resume or whatever it is that you believe might be a problem when employers see that you might not have enough experience or whatever. Many of my clients have some kind of self-conscious thing that they're like, the hiring manager is going to think this or they're going to think that. What if they don't believe I can have enough experience in this particular platform? What if they judge me for this career gap? And I'm telling you, when you become a value creator, when you become the person who demonstrates this value and you become really good at that, and that's what you spend your time and effort and energy doing, you do not have to worry about those other things because they become irrelevant. So what you need to do is lead in your professional materials with transformative creations. So what I mean by that is talking about results that you've created and really honing in on the result, and then attaching how that result matters to them and what they're dealing with right now. So it's not about just answering the questions, because sometimes they don't know what questions to ask to get the information that they need. Evaluating them as much as they evaluate you, because when you act like the prize, you become the prize. And whether that's to the person in front of you or to the next person you speak with or the next hiring manager you speak with, that's what ultimately happens. So you want to treat yourself like you are the prize, regardless of what other people think, because you will inevitably become the prize for the right organization. And that's a promise. The second key is becoming a memorable presence. So be like the pistachio lavender ice cream with the sea salt in the freezer instead of being the vanilla, right? And most people are the vanilla. So I've sat in personally on hundreds of interviews, and I can tell you most people are vanilla. They're afraid to have an opinion. They're afraid to share something that they might be afraid they're going to be judged for. They're afraid to truly step into having a different opinion than someone else might have. They're ultimately people pleasing, but just trying to answer questions correctly instead of actually positioning themselves as somebody who has a stance, somebody who has something to say, someone who has a specific approach. So use language that no one else in your industry is using. So have an opinion, break some conventional resume rules, focus on being memorable rather than checking all the traditional boxes. One really powerful way to do this is by telling stories, very, very powerful stories. So I have lots of videos on stories, and I have a 10 example story guide that you can download right away. We'll put the link below for you. And it has 10 examples of real stories that have landed job offers, examples from myself and my clients. And you can download that. It's got fill in the blank templates for how you can come up with your own stories and 25 questions to ask yourself so that you can easily come up with those stories that will get you hired. All right. Next thing is lead with your zone of genius moves. So what I mean by this is, this might require a little self-reflection from you first, but figuring out what it is is your zone of genius? And what I mean by that is, where do you lose track of time when you're working on something? Where do you love so much that you just become like ensconced by it and you just love it and you don't want to stop. Like you're excited to get up and do it. Like for me, sometimes it's making these videos and usually it's coaching my clients, right? What is that zone of genius for you? And then go full force on talking about it and how you've actually used your zone of genius to create impactful results and focusing on bridging the gap between what you've done and what they need. When we don't do this, and goes back to people being afraid of being judged in the interview and such, what happens is it's like you are a great musician, you have amazing, unique music. But instead of playing that because you're afraid people aren't going to accept it or they're not going to like it, you end up lip syncing someone else's popular song because you think that's what they want. And that's a big mistake because even if you do that really well, and even if they like it, you will likely end up in the wrong fit position and you'll have to start again anyway. That happened to me personally. I did that. I was in an interview. They were asking me all these questions. It was going really well and I could see they were responding to me really well. And then they started asking me questions about accounting, which to me was a red flag because I thought I was applying for an HR role. So why were they asking me all these accounting questions? But instead of questioning that or telling the truth about how I really felt, what I did instead was I told them, yeah, I can do that accounting work that you need. I can totally reconcile those statements. I can do that. No problem. And I ended up getting that job. And then I quit 3 months later because it was a misrepresented position. So next time I learned from that mistake, when I went into another job and they asked me about accounting, I said, look, that is not my zone of genius. So if the accounting is going to require more than a couple hours a week, I'm probably not the right fit for this role. And I just said that up front because I wasn't going to get into that situation again. So that's an example of just really leading with my strengths and knowing what my strengths were not, and just not being afraid to put them out there and say that out loud, knowing that, you know, the wrong fit would say no to that. And that's what I actually wanted. Next one is design your career journey rather than trying to follow a standardized test approach with predetermined right answers. So developing materials that challenge assumptions rather than reinforcing them. So present bold perspectives that someone in your position might not do. So say, for example, if you have a strong opinion about automating tasks that could be automated and not having somebody do them manually, right? State that. Say, yeah, I had one person in an interview say, he's like, oh yeah, my most fun challenge is I always try to automate myself out of a job, right? And this was really attractive to the people who were looking to hire him because they wanted more efficiencies like that. They thought it was funny and they were like, yes, we want him to automate himself out of a job because then we can put him to use to automating other things. And imagine what a great resource this person could be if that's the way he's thinking, right? So it's going to show night and day difference between someone who's like, okay, yeah, I'll sit down and I'll do the manual labor that you want. And they are wasting hours of company time doing that manual entry when somebody else is thinking about how can they automate this and make this more efficient so they can move on to something else, right? So those are very, very powerful stances that you can take. For example, so I want you to start thinking of what are your powerful stances? What have you done? What really strong opinions do you have that have really moved somebody forward, have given someone a shift, have changed the way that things are done for the better so that you can actually attach results to your line of thinking, to your process of thinking. And then the next one, power of being specific. So I talk about this in one of the previous videos that I did, but it's like articulating exact challenges that you faced, and not just that, but then attaching them to how the person you're speaking to is now facing challenges, right? So the challenges that you've dealt with in the past, they are assets that you now bring to the table to help people deal with their challenges. And that is the power that you hold, the leverage that you hold as a candidate is not only your ability to articulate these challenges really effectively, but your ability to bridge the gap between the challenges you faced and the challenges they're facing and exactly how it's applicable. You want to demonstrate understanding of how decision makers think and feel about these challenges. So when you solved the challenge for somebody previously and you saw how good the results were and you walked through a process to do that, talk about how that was responded to, talk about the results, talk about the transformation for the company. So I have an example, a client I worked with, she created a communications plan around layoffs. So the CEO was doing layoffs, and of course that's a touchy situation when they're doing layoffs. And so she created a communications plan to make sure that even though this was not a good situation, they wouldn't worsen it by scaring off the existing employees. So what she did was she crafted some careful communications. She got some surveys sent out to everybody. She held one-on-ones with people, and she made recommendations for the CEO to hold one-on-ones with the people who were let go, the closest to them, so that they can answer specific questions, not encouraging gossip, but also being transparent in a way that the company wanted to be, so that the company could then grow from there and still and continue to move forward, instead of what happens when a lot of companies do that is they end up in a lot of trouble with a lot of people really disliking them because they handle it wrong. Now, I'm not saying it's responsible to do layoffs. Of course it's not, but sometimes these situations happen. And when you need to be discussing them in an interview, you want to be discussing them in a way where you can talk about how you helped turn something around, where you helped create something better for the company, the impact that you had. So that's an example of a specific situation that you could do. And when I talked to my client about this, I asked her questions like, what was the thing that you did that was different than what someone else would have done? And she brought in her empathetic skills, her thinking about the people who were behind it, what they would want to know, getting into their shoes, thinking from their perspective. When the CEO wasn't thinking about any of this, he had other things to deal with. So she thought about all of it, set it all up in his calendar, told him what to say, helped coach him through the situation in order to maintain relationships throughout the organization through a difficult, tumultuous time. And that's what I have for you. So thank you so much for watching. This was the video on how to attract opportunities to you. This is how, in a nutshell, is how you position yourself. So when you position yourself as a resource, as somebody who is a problem solver, who is a solution finder, you then attract people, you bring people in. Whoever you speak to is now leaning in versus repelled. So what happens in a scarcity mindset situation is people will often be like, I need to follow up. I need to make sure they understood. I need to, like, it's kind of like a needy, chasey energy, like a dog, like hoping to get some scraps, some little bits of information here and there, versus the professional chef who is there to serve an amazing meal and then let their work speak for that. Right. And then that person is then going to be chased down and be like, hey, I want to go eat at that restaurant again. Oh, I want that person to cook for me again because that was amazing, right? Instead of being the person who needs to be like, I need to follow up. I didn't hear from them. It's been a week. What do I do? Blah, blah, blah. I'm waiting to hear back. Like, that is needy, desperate energy versus the energy of, I have put an amazing plate forward for these people. I have done my utmost and they will come to me. And then doing that over and over and over until it is inevitable that this comes to you. All right. I hope that I've painted a good picture of what it feels like to be in the vibe of attracting those opportunities versus chasing them, which is what most people do. I promise you it works. There is, of course, action that you have to take, which I'm happy to walk you through in my 3-day training. So I have a 3-day training. It goes from the A to Z of everything you need to know to land your first 6-figure role, if that's where you're at, or double your salary, depending on where you're at in your career. And I have done both multiple times, and I'm happy to share the information with you on how I did it and have helped hundreds of clients do it too. So you can get that link below. You can sign up for that training. You'll get a bunch of freebie bonuses as well. And give me a thumbs up if you like the video. Give me a thumbs down if you didn't like it. Subscribe to the channel. Leave me a comment, and I will see you in the next video.
Tell me something, boy. Aren't you tired of trying to fill that void? Do you need more?